I really want to thank Dr. Todd Herman for all of his support in many ways, but particularly with Summer Wheat being able to realize Foragers. I was doing the slideshow for tonight, and I pulled up my original version, which I used to pitch this project to Todd, and the date on it was July 2nd, the day after I started working here.
Yay!
Which is amazing, like I'm getting chills, just like thinking, so much of what we as curators and the artists with whom we work, so much of what we do is made only possible through the support we get from our studio assistants, from our workmates, from our funders, but never more so than with the directors of our institutions. And so this wouldn't have been possible without Todd's support from the get-go. So thank you, Todd, so much.
Thank you, Todd.
Okay. So we're going to take kind of a little different take on the artist curator talk tonight. We're going to try and make it a lot more informal. Partially because, I love Summer. She's one of my favorite people to spend time talking to, and I want to try and recreate the experience that I have every time that I'm with her, which is these meandering conversations where I learn something new, not just about her, but about how to see the world. And it's never a linear path. And so I'm hoping that even though there's a slideshow that we're responding to, that we can create that. But we're going to start with a film about the making of Foragers, in the hopes that we are going to excise all of that conversation out of this discussion tonight and talk about the work in a much kind of grander, larger scale, influences, goals, intentions. So I'm going to start with that film.
Cool.
The title of this piece is Foragers. It's really a piece that's meant to empower women and to also change the way in which we're telling stories and see women from a different perspective. A lot of the images are from an historical context. I'm using a lot of these reference points of males doing laborious acts, and I've superimposed women in their place. I think that it will be very powerful in this moment to create a woman, for instance, that's 4 stories tall.
Summer Wheat and I met a couple of years ago in Brooklyn, and Summer showed me installations she had done using colored vinyl on windows that explored many of those same magical qualities of stained glass. I said to her, wouldn't it be incredible to do one of her window installations here in this atrium? And immediately she started thinking about it, and she started doing drawings and studies, and we went back and forth. We wanted to make sure that when Summer created Foragers, that it would connect these 2 magnificent masterpieces that we have in our atrium. The other thing that we hoped with Foragers is that it would create a bridge between the 2 aspects of the Mint collection. So on the one hand, there's the Mint Museum of Art. She's using line and color and abstraction and figuration. But then we also have the Mint Museum of Craft, Design, and Fashion, and that comes out in the fact that this piece is all hand-cut colored vinyls that are then adhered to a single clear piece of vinyl.
The work was produced in Brooklyn using, of course, all the required distances and measures during the pandemic. So it was kind of challenging to figure out how to work remotely without having the actual window in front of us and make sure that everything will fit and the entire drawings would be translated in a large format. So we went through a series of experiments to process them until we got to this final technique.
This piece is truly like a giant collage that we're breaking down on my iPad and then also just doing things by hand. From a distance, it will read as possibly a large computer screen or something that's out of this world, and then when you get up close to it, you'll be able to see each one of the layers put together by hand.
Everything that Summer and Lucia had brainstormed about the project and all the troubleshooting was perfectly successful. And within 3 days, iTech got the windows up, and we have this 62-foot by 60-foot hand-cut collage filling our atrium space with life and light and figures and color and this kinetic energy that is just transformative for the space and for those who enter it.
Because the shadows that are created in the light, when it comes through the windows, the color wraps around the viewer, you are part of that art experience. And that is something that we're trying to convey as much as we can and as many times as we can, because those instances are rare. And when you see works like Foragers, it tells a story, but it also creates sort of an existential experience, which is about light and color and being part of something bigger.
As much as the work relates to the atmosphere and the environment, and it shifts and changes throughout the day based on the location of the sun, it also has this emotive charge to it that evokes different ranges of emotions depending on where your mind is, where your heart is, where you are. So the idea of proximity really plays a large role, both emotionally and physically, when viewing this work.
You shall see
Turned
every
out really
credit
good.
screen. So Ben Primo with Smart Lab created that foam for us. And there's also a time lapse that will be coming out soon, so you can watch it all happen. Okay. Oh, don't. Okay. So I wanted to start with this painting, which I know is not the high-res image that I promised I would put in, and I'm so sorry. Every other slide is going to be perfect, so I'm very sorry. But I really wanted to show this image because this is the first time that I saw Summer's work. And I was so curious about it, and I just thought, what is going on in this work? This is insane. And then very quickly it changed quite dramatically. And so I wanted to just start by talking about the difference at that time. We're going to do like a little walkthrough of Summer's evolution with the paintings.
Sure. So the one before it, I was really just starting to create these paintings that maybe you've seen here before, where I'm pushing paint through like a wire mesh. And it was this was the first series of paintings that I'd made directly from my drawings, which is a whole other story. But the next work, I was kind of like really trying to figure out how I was going to harness this process, because it was new to me and I had just kind of created it after many years of working in my studio and failing a lot and just trying to figure out what I was doing. And I have a project manager named Lucia, who you saw in the video, and she's very bossy. And I was really having a hard time trying to figure out what my next series was going to be about. And she said, you know what you need to do? You need to just stop painting with color and work with black, white, and gold for like a year and see what happens. And so it was her idea, and I thought it was a really smart one. So it was like at that moment I really began to investigate not only like how to make these paintings, because I had only made three works like this one. And I needed to figure out how to do it. And that was a lot to take on. And then I needed to figure out what the content was supposed to be about. And I really wanted this process to reveal like a new iteration of how you would see paint and how you would see painting. And I felt like there needed to be something within the content that would also reveal something new. So I started looking at a lot of historical images of just these Egyptian images, actually, of men pushing carts and doing, like, sweeping the floor and acts of manual labor. And so I started thinking about, like, having women in their place. And so this painting is called We Run Things, and it's just a series of women occupying different roles than what they've typically been seen as in historical painting.
And these paintings are massive. I wanted to show an image that would give you an idea of the scale. But then the other thing that I didn't realize about these works was that they have these wonderful bejeweled surfaces. And I guess I had seen it in the works and just didn't notice it before because I was so taken with the figures and the movement, because there's such a rhythm to your work that I just didn't notice them before. And then when I was putting the slideshow together, it was interesting to see where these would appear. And here's a detail from We Run Things where you can see these embedded on the surface. So when Summer and I were meeting today to go over this slideshow, I said to her, so why did you stop bedazzling the paintings? Because there's something really wonderful about them. And then she showed me these amazing instructions that come with the works. And hopefully you can see, we have some more details here. So each of those little augmentations comes with a very precise map that the owner and installer is responsible for following and making happen.
Yeah, I was kind of having a lot of problems with working this way because I would do all of this work, obviously, trying to make it really easily understandable for people when they were installing my work, because I wanted the pieces to have a conversation about the intersection between painting and sculpture, and so I wanted them to have this dimensionality with these ornaments I was making for the paintings. And I would show up at an exhibition and I would clearly give instructions on how the work should be installed, and no one was installing the ornaments that I made. No one. So I just started taking the hint that this was going to be too involved for people to wrap their head around, no matter how easy I tried to make it for them. It just really never made sense. So I like these just as they are. I think they don't really even need to go on the paintings. They're just really something all on their own. And so I started to simplify things and take that out of the process.
I don't know. See, I love this idea of the challenge.
Yeah, I know you would be a curator that would actually do the work that it takes to put something like this together. And this is an easy one. I mean, the other ones have like several boxes per painting, and
Right, so there's a lot of that.
yeah.
I think they're amazing. So I wanted to run through a number of these in the series because the work has changed so dramatically, even though the content is still there and similar. The color palette has changed, but so have the surfaces. And I'm not going to talk too much about the construction of the works because we have them upstairs in the galleries. You can go and visit and see our beautiful With Side with Shoulder upstairs. Soko has a wonderful exhibition right now of Summer's paintings. You can go and examine the new works there. But I really love how these earlier works, even though they're only 3 years ago, right, 4 years ago, there's this delicate stitching, and we'll talk more about some of the influences there later on. But that it's almost like thread instead of that heavy kind of yarn that it feels like they're becoming, and the beadwork that they're becoming in the later pieces. There's a delicacy that I think is much more prominent in these early works. Was that you just trying to figure out still the medium and how it was working?
Yeah, I was also like mixing a lot of different paints together. So I've changed the actual combinations that I'm working with now. So it's not exactly the same paint that I'm using, and the paint I'm using now is much higher quality. But it's just it was a different moment. Like I was really in a different place with this process, and I was pushing every single piece by hand, and now I'm using different tools, and so it just it conveys a completely different expression.
And I also was curious, Summer and I were talking earlier, the amount of pattern that is more evident in these works. Like clearly pattern is important in all of the pieces that she does. But I felt like in these exploratory paintings, again, only just a couple of years ago, there is more of this separation between the figures and the decoration, that pattern and decoration, because you were still kind of figuring out the language of those two things before they could come together.
Right. Yeah, I think this was also a part of that whole moment where I was really trying to just investigate shape and at the same time pattern, and how these shapes and patterns were working together, and how the shapes and patterns were also working in conjunction with the figuration I was doing. Like that was sort of like building an immersive environment, much like the window project with these paintings. It's just that it was a completely different medium. So I've always worked environmentally, and when I'm creating a show, I really think about how the viewer is going to physically feel in the space, and I think that's really important to me, that there is like a feeling that you would have when you would walk around a sculpture, where you would want to sort of navigate around the work and try and understand if it was two-dimensional or three-dimensional, and have a back and forth between space. And so I think pattern really is an optical sort of way or avenue towards playing with those types of ideas.
Yeah, this feels more like a roadmap.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
I just love this painting. I don't really have much to say about it. I just want to see it every chance I have. Because this is where I feel like everything is starting to merge together. Like the patterns that we just saw in the Boots painting and all of those previous paintings. And it's all coming to sort of decorate these glorious forms that are just full in their presence.
It's
right?
so funny that you would perceive it that way, because these moments were so stressful for me. You know, like this was a major moment of crisis. I really didn't know if I was going to put that piece in the show, and it was just, it's interesting, like the different perspectives that people have, you know, in relation to what I go through.
Yeah, I don't see it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, you transcended the work.
Yeah.
Or it transcended your trauma.
Yeah, I guess so.
Appropriate. And this is sort of, again, like the previous work, the culmination of that series, I feel like. That image of women really owning that space of hunting and working and creating this utopia that they can support unto themselves.
Yeah. And this was like the last major black, white, and gold painting that I made also.
Yeah,
this was when
shocking.
I kind of said goodbye to that moment.
Yeah, because I saw this in your studio when you were still finishing it. And then, like, I feel like a few months later, I was suddenly seeing this work. And I was like, where did all this color come from? It was shocking to me.
Well, I had always been working with a lot of color up until that moment where I went into the black, white, and gold series. But it was interesting because I started reintroducing color into my palette at this show when it was in LA. And so I felt like I had this kind of perfect re-entry point to go back into color because I knew it would be very welcomed in LA and embraced in a different way. And so I just kind of like took it full on back into that show.
And this was after you had done the residency in Greece, is that correct? The colors, the drawings, was that from that residency? You can say no, I'm not embarrassed. Okay. I'm fine being wrong.
But it's okay.
So there was no connection between that time when you were on the island in Greece and...
Not with this work, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So had you just been waiting until you'd be able to go back to this bright palette?
No, I hadn't really been waiting, but I knew it was time to go back. Like I felt like I had gone through enough, and I knew what the shapes were, and I knew who the characters were, and I knew what they were trying to say and do. And so I felt like I was ready to reintroduce color back into my set of, problems to solve.
So I did want to take a chance to show kind of the behind the scenes element. So this is one of the screens in the studio after Summer has pushed those lines through the surface. And you can see a detail there on the right, so you can actually get that texture. And then there she is, and we'll see this painting a little later on, working behind the scenes. And you'll see in her hand, there's that depleted bag. It looks kind of like a cake decorator's bag. And here are some of those tools in the studio. Do you want to say anything before I move on?
No, I think they're so pretty, just like that.
I really love that.
I have to say, it's really weird to be, this is the first time I've done any kind of like lecture or talked in public since COVID, and it's like we're so in our own little worlds, and then to just sit in front of people after being, inside for so long, it's strange. But anyways,
Having
I thought
everyone
I'd
in
let
the
you know.
audience in masks. And
Yeah.
everyone at home, we're not
yeah.
wearing masks, but everyone here. I'm not going to linger on all of the work that Summer does in addition to the paintings, but her is incredibly varied. She works in all different forms, beautiful sculpture and decorative objects, which I'm showing you here, the tuliparies. I was heartbroken to find out this was a limited series for you, and you were not going to do them again, because I did dream of having them, but I'm just throwing that out there in case you think about it some other time and wonder what I would like
to
for
make
Christmas.
another one. I mean, I made those in Sicily, and I was there for several months at a time working with an Italian studio, and it was really phenomenal. It was really fun.
And then to the windows, the stained glass windows. So as I said in the film, these images, the Oklahoma Contemporary, and then these windows that Summer did at Smack Mellon, were the impetus for suggesting that she would tackle this project. So do you want to talk a bit about, do you want to start with?
Yeah, I could do this one. I was invited to do this show in January 2017, and I knew that I was going to have to take on this space in a really particular way because it has like a very cathedral element to it, and it wasn't a space that you can just like hang paintings on the wall. Like, you have to take in the windows, and you have to sort of like consider the environment and the architecture. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but it's a really epic kind of exhibition space. And so it's in Dumbo in Brooklyn. And so when I was invited to do this exhibition, I was thinking about how, like, in a year from that moment, we were going to be in the middle of, or at the beginning of a Trump presidency. And so I wanted to create a show that would be something that people could go to as a place of refuge, that there would be a moment that you could kind of take in this internal garden and breathe and have some reflection from within, because I knew that the outer political climate was going to be really chaotic. And so that's what this whole installation is about.
And then there's another manifestation of the fraught anxiety that you were experiencing in the world.
This was
Beekeepers.
Yeah. At the same time, I was also making a lot of beekeepers when Trump became president, because I was thinking about the kind of chaos and the danger and the element of, not being able to see ahead, like not knowing what was going to happen at any given moment. You could be like stung or hurt. And so I started thinking about beekeepers and the lineage of beekeepers in different parts of history, and I made a series of these female beekeepers.
And so I just want to remind you, like, this is that screen that we saw earlier of her creating. So with this, I want to talk about some of your reference material, because this also fascinated me. As a researcher, I don't know where or how you find all these incredibly deep and bizarre images throughout history. So we have Egyptian beekeepers, there are images of beekeeping in ancient Greek works, we also have Baroque, we have Renaissance. I mean, it's truly incredible how you find it. So I just wanted to ask you about your research process.
It sort of happens organically, but primarily I'm just interested in finding works that are slightly obscure, but that take on very iconic symbols or iconic verses or stories or allegories, and it often happens just naturally. Like the Beekeeper series really was because I was thinking about this presidency we were entering and how terrified I was, and I was thinking about how terrified I am of bees, and it sort of spawned from that. And then when I started looking up the history of beekeeping and how it was used in art history, it really was used in all of these different stories. And so it happened quite naturally, and I'm fascinated by finding symbols that can relate to multiple different histories. I think I'm very interested in finding these moments of translation that can transcend through different times, through different religious contexts, through different cultural moments. And so it's fascinating to find a symbol for that, like fish or bees, snakes, things like that.
Yeah, and I guess fish I'm more familiar with. It just fascinated me that you found all of these images of beekeeping, particularly in Egyptian references. So, yeah. I'm coming to you the next time I'm doing a project and I need images of something. And then there were also these contemporary references, like the beekeepers in Nepal. It was just beautiful.
Yeah, really beautiful.
So there was this very specific reference point to Foragers. And actually, Todd was asking you about this when you were here installing, and it was great to hear how you suddenly realized.
Yeah, this was really funny. I mean, I sometimes get surprised, or I often get surprised by things in my own work, because I work so much from my intuition, and I'm just going all the time, and I'm constantly driven to figure out what my next problems are to solve. I'm just built that way. And when this piece came together, I could only work on one panel at a time in my studio. So I couldn't really see what the entire work was going to convey until obviously the installation was happening. And so once the pieces of the puzzle started coming together, I realized that the characters that I had viewed at this archaeology museum in Athens, Greece, a couple of summers ago were really the sources of inspiration for this entire window. And I was in love with these little characters. They're very tiny. They're like the size of maybe a little bit bigger than a thimble or a couple of inches. And within them, they're really containing like these amazing expressions of humanity. And you can see like all of the same characters and personalities that we find surrounding ourselves today within these artifacts. And so I remember I went by the museum right before I got on the ferry to head to one of the islands, and I did a lot of this drawing on the ferry on my iPad, and I was so happy just from experiencing the energy of these characters. And so I realized that they were at this scale very small, but they were saying these very loud expressions to me. And then I think the way that that translated itself without me really even knowing it was that, you know, that energy was coming to life on this grand scale. And so that was a really nice surprise for me to realize that, because once it started coming together, I looked back into my phone and I found these images and I remembered the connecting points to the drawing.
Especially the scale difference.
Yeah.
I mean, to go from these very like minuscule but powerful objects to
Yeah.
these monumental forms that still retain so much intimacy.
Yeah, yeah. It was really exciting to build that connection.
But then, of course, there is the screaming reference of Henri Matisse's
Yes.
Vaughn's Chapel.
I've always looked at this chapel as a point of reference or a guide almost. Like, this was what Matisse felt like was his only masterpiece, which is really hard for me to believe. But it was a space in which he was able to completely immerse himself into every aspect of the work. So you have the windows, you have the tile walls, he made the robes for the priests, and there was this ritual or religious ceremony within the chapel. And so all of these different elements, performance, spirituality, like color, light, line, everything came together on a domestic level, on a ritualistic level. Like, it was sort of encapsulated in this one architectural space that, you know, he really took on. And if you even think about like taking on just a canvas, that alone is such an enormous amount of responsibility and such a huge kind of challenge. And to think on taking on like a space that's going to exist forever, that you can actually experience and that people need to use, I just think he really, it is a masterpiece. So I always go back to it.
And now you've done that. Like, is that very surreal, or did you not think about the weight of the responsibility of this going up and being here and
I never think about anything like that.
yeah.
But I do worry about if it's going to work. Mm-hmm. I just don't think like, should I not do this? I don't worry about that. I just worry, will or will it not work?
But I remember when the piece, because both of us were pretty calm the whole time. Like, we were just focused on making this happen over the course of a year.
Right.
And then I guess the night before Summer flew out here, before we started installation, she called me up to say, "Are you excited? Isn't this great?" And I was like, "I haven't slept in 3 days. I think my insides are falling out of me. I'm so anxious about the installation." Like, I was just worried about getting them on the windows. Like, that was my biggest fear. And you were like, "It's gonna be great, it's gonna be fine, don't worry about it, it's gonna be fine, we're gonna have so much fun, it's gonna be great." And then the morning they were up, we were all alone in the space. It was a Saturday morning, iTech had finished the day before, and we were sitting here, and that's when you freaked out.
I did.
I was like, "It's over. Like, why are you even worried now? It's done, and we're not taking them down." Like,
Yeah.
it's not.
I was really panicking, and I had just such anxiety that entire day, and I was just like, what have I done? Why did I do this? This is too big. I just was so worried and embarrassed and just like concerned for myself and my own well-being. And it just took me a while to wrap my head around it. I still, you know, it's an outrageous thing to do, you know.
And that's, of course, when all these interviews are happening and people are asking her, like, "So how do you feel to finally have them realize?" And she was just like, And everyone would come up to me afterwards, because there were like 3 filmmakers interviewing her, and they would come up to me afterwards and be like, is she okay? Like, is she freaked out? And I was just like, it'll be fine. It's just unfortunate we're doing this today. But it'll be totally fine.
I think I'm more driven by the process is what it boils down to. Like, I really enjoy like solving the problems and making the work and figuring out how to do it and the excitement of it, you know, of the installation and all of that. And then the end result is always, you know, shocking to me because it's not really mine anymore. And so I can't have any control over it. And so I think it doesn't really matter what it is. I always panic.
But now you love them.
Yeah.
We text each other periodically to say how happy we are with them.
Yeah.
So I feel like you're good.
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy. I sort of have to go through this threshold of letting it go.
So I wanted to swerve to a different area of influence because the stained glass, like the Vance windows are a given, right? Like they're quickly realized here. And you quote them and are reverential for them in Foragers itself. But then there are a number of other things that influence you. And there's, you know, color, obviously, in Rothko and in Gee's Bend, and the structure of those works. Also, you know, one can make those lineages. But I wanted you to talk about the more intimate relationship that you have with these works, particularly the Gee's Bend.
Yeah, I went to a Gee's Bend exhibition in 2007 or 6, I think it was, in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was my first encounter with these quilts. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but they're probably my favorite works of art. Just having the experience of them. I had no idea how much they would have an impact on my life and my practice and how just powerful they are to see in person. But basically, they're just these quilts that were never really made to be seen as works of art. They've been used, and you can see that they've been on, you know, beds, and they have like a life energy within them, and there's like cigarette burns in the fabric, and handprints, and just life held within the material. And I really loved that kind of felt experience that was held within the energy of those pieces. And that day, I also went to the permanent collection at the High, and there were all these Jonathan Laskers and Peter Halleys and Rothkos and geometric abstraction that I had always loved and gone to as a point of reference. And I thought it was so interesting to compare those two worlds, to think about what geometric abstraction, or this invented geometric abstraction, how it was working through a felt experience, and then also like how it was like rendered in an academic, rigorous kind of way. And so I want my work to kind of straddle both of those ideas.
And that idea of the felt experience, that investigation of the external world, and you internalizing it enough to then express it in a line, in a drawing, in the work, is something that I want to talk about here with your drawings.
Yeah.
I love these scrolls so much. I'm a sucker for a scroll, as I keep telling Dia, whose scrolls are all around us. But these, I wanted you to talk about these.
These are from my graduate school years. I started making these because I was working at a trolley office in Savannah, Georgia. And I was spending my days working as a secretary in this trolley office, and my nights in graduate school talking about contemporary art.
And you had register tape available.
And so my real studio at that time was my office desk, and I used all of the supplies, and I just drew all day long as I sat at the desk, and I really got into the use of office materials and the idea that, you know, I had this kind of authority over the scale of the register tapes, because they're quite small, and the pinpoint of the pens I was using was quite tiny, so I was able to really grapple and find my voice through these drawings. And at my studio in graduate school, everything was so existential, and all of the conversations that I was having with my colleagues was just way too much for me to get onto, you know, any type of painting. And so I felt overwhelmed in my studio, but at this desk, I felt like I could get my voice across, or what I wanted to say. So I really feel like these register tapes are the core of my, core of the beginning of my practice, really.
And you talked about how drawing was something that, since you were a small child, was something that allowed you to feel like you could understand but also control and create the world, right? Can you talk a bit about like being in the car and drawing like air conditioners and we don't have those drawings.
I would just, I remember just being like in my dad's car, and I had a pencil and a piece of paper, and I would try and figure out, like, for instance, the air conditioner vents. Like, I would look and see, you know, how this triangle on the side of the vent was creating the space behind the lines, and it was just like these little geometric worlds that I was trying to resolve and understand how these lines and shapes were coming together to create this space. And so from very early on, you know, a lot of times I would only have Prismacolor pencils or markers or pens, and I would just endlessly try and draw and find a way to convey something with that kind of simple material. I mean, I didn't know I was so simplistic, but it was just kind of what I had and what I knew of. So
that mastery of the world through trying to recreate and understand it technically is something that
I was trying to figure out what was going on.
And so the drawings on the register tape then lead to these lace, the interest in lace. They don't lead to the interest in lace, I should say, in this conversation.
Yeah.
Your drawing interest then connects to this attraction to lace.
Yeah, I started, as I was delving into this idea of trying to merge together some relationship between something like a Giesbin quilt and a Jonathan Lasker painting, I decided to find these intersecting points through lace patterns. And so I had these lace patterns all over my studio at the time, and I was trying to memorize and figure out how these lines were coming together to create an image of lace, and like the intricacies within a lace pattern. The black, I would use black and white photocopies like this to try and figure out like everything I was just saying, only in the realm of abstraction through lace.
But it's beautiful to see how this then leads to your painted lines.
Yeah, this was the first time that I was able to get the paint to do what I wanted it to and create those lines in a sculptural way.
I mean, this looks just like crochet work that my grandmother would do.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't believe when you told me this was paint.
Yeah, I remember the second I made that. I mean, I remember that painting like it was yesterday. It was such a really cool moment because I had worked for a couple of years in my studio without doing visits or anything, just obsessed with trying to figure out how to do that. Yeah. Like it was a moment.
So I have a lot of things that I was going to say here and talk to Summer about, but I'm going to move on in the interest of time, except to say that I love how you've recreated the relationship of the mother and child in this. That's my only personal thing that I need to get across tonight. So this was a wonderful comment that you said after the windows went up.
Yeah, I was having a hard time getting to sleep the night before I came down here to do the installation, and I started thinking about this Japanese pottery technique where they intentionally break up the ceramics and then bind them back together with this gold line. And I was thinking about that in relation to this window project and how the Japanese use this gold line that defines the broken edges of the shards of ceramics to relate to beauty and to call beauty upon, you know, something that's broken, or to make something that's broken beautiful and emphasize where it's broken. And so I was thinking about that in relation to this piece, to this window, and how the moment that we're in this country and how much we're struggling and what we're going through, it's a really broken and fractured and dismantled time. And I just was so excited when I realized that there was a real potential in the beauty of this piece and it coming to life and bringing healing and beauty to people, and in hopes that that would create a new perspective or a moment for people that could escape this moment that we're in.
I love that connection of the East and the West, and then the broken and the
Yeah.
collage together, particularly because it's a collage,
Yeah.
you know, and it really is in that idiom.
Trying to piece back together and accepting that it's broken and not trying to hide that it's broken, because I think that's another point that I was reflecting on, is that, you know, these ceramics, they don't really try and hide the fact that they're broken, and I don't think that we should try and hide that we're in this moment of feeling broken.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point. Yeah. Embrace it and move on through the portal.
Yeah.
Agreed. I feel like we should end there. we had 2 more sections about tapestries you've discovered.
Yeah, we have a lot more to say.
Artist studios. I feel like we should cut our losses. It's 7:30.
Yeah.
Can we open it up to questions? Pam Stowe.
Oh. What? Oh, I was actually going.
I'm sorry. Okay, that's it. I'm doing the mic. Pam asked how Summer got her name.
It's a really sad story, and you're going to be let down. But my mom.
Make something up.
My mom was going to name me Angela, and after I was born, there was a soap opera on TV, and the credits were scrolling down, and there was an extra that day on her favorite soap opera, and her name was Summer, and so then my parents took 3 days before they signed the birth certificate, but that's how it happened.
I think the first night after we did the test install, we went out to dinner with Neely Verano and Chris and Kathy Cope. And Chris asked the table, this wasn't directed at you, but he asked the table how do we think about our names? I don't remember how it came up, but it was...
He was trying to get to...
I don't think he was, though. I don't. Maybe he was. No, he's not subtle like that. So he asked, and we all went around the table, and we got to you, and we all answered very earnestly. And you said, I don't think about my name at all. Every day I have to explain at least 5 times a day, everything you just said. And I was like, oh my God, that's fascinating. I can't imagine having to have a conversation 5 times a day about my name. And then when I started making reservations for you and arrangements for you and talking to people about you, every conversation was, Is that her real name? Yes, it's Summer Wheat. Yes, it's Summer Wheat. It's spelled like it sounds, yes. No, she didn't make the name up. That is her mother given name constantly.
It's so funny.
And I always think of that dinner when that conversation. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
You're numb to it now. Okay, Betsy, were you raising your hand or no? Okay. Oh, shoot, I'm sorry, I forgot. Wait, okay, I'm coming, Neely. Okay. Yeah, just,
Can you hear me?
yeah.
I can hear you.
Wow. Two questions for you. First is, I've seen your smaller scale works, but it's sort of an anomaly for you. So have you always worked in large scale? That would be
Always. I don't know. I mean, I guess it really would depend upon what kind of scale I had access to. So like, for instance, when I was in graduate school, the only place I felt comfortable working was at that desk, and so I could only work on a small scale. And then after that, I went back into the studio after a couple of years, and it just kind of went back and forth. I think in general, I am a sculptor. I think that's really what I am. And the reason I became a painter is because I didn't have the kind of space I needed to make sculpture. And so I think it's an interesting question because I've always just sort of made work based upon the sort of size that I could conceive of at the time, or in relation to whatever kind of space I had at the time, because there were several years when I would work out of my apartment or out of my living room, and it kind of depended on what my life circumstance was at the moment and how I would work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then my second question is, I had the honor of seeing your studio up in Brooklyn and how you work and the process. But can you talk about the point where you started pushing paint through the mesh and what you did before that, and sort of, I just have talked to so many artists where sometimes it was an accident, sometimes it was discovery, sometimes it was experimentation. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm still so stuck on that, and I'm so fascinated by how you do that. I've just never seen or heard anything like it.
I was, at the time, I was just in this period of trying to figure out how to make paint into a sculptural form and to build an intersection between painting and drawing and sculpture. And prior to that, I was always making the drawings like you see in the register tape. That was kind of what I did at home. I always made them. And I wanted to find a way to bring them into my paintings, but I didn't want to paint just like lines on a canvas. It just didn't have enough, it didn't hold my interest enough. And so I was painting with very thick paint, like impasto paint on canvas. And at one point, I just kind of like took that paint off of the canvas and I just started making things out of it and asking questions of it. And I started extruding it through various tools and making my own tools. And at the time, I would buy a lot of materials from the dollar store. And I bought a set of window screens from the dollar store one day, and I was playing around with it, and it happened. And then it was like 1 a.m. when I sort of started finding my way with them, and I ran back to the 24-hour dollar store in the middle of the night in Brooklyn. And I was running so hard. I was so excited because I felt like I had found the way that I wanted to work, and it was really cool.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a gallery in LA. No, it's okay.
Her studio is in Brooklyn.
My studio is in Brooklyn. Oh, well, I have to meet him someday. Oh, thanks. So are you. I love your headband.
It's in Ridgewood. She's in Ridgewood.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you. Oh, I feel weird talking with my back to everyone, so I'm going to come over here very quickly. Thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate all of your support. Thank you to everyone online. Honestly, we didn't figure out how we could solicit questions online. We're up to do that for the next virtual talk. This is our first virtual talk, so we're still kind of figuring this all out. So thank you. We appreciate you coming tonight, hanging out. L3, the In Vivid Color exhibition, which opens to the public tomorrow. It is open for you all to go and visit until 8:30. Please go and see it. Dr. Jonathan Stillman and I organized the show. We're very excited about it. Foragers is the first piece in that show. And thank you so much for coming. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.